Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to the English alumni panel. Today we have four Eastern alumni. Sean Kegler sends his apologies. He's incapable of making it today. But as a form of introduction, we're just going to ask each panelist to say their name and a brief synopsis of what they're currently doing with their English degrees.
I guess I'll start. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Sniffen. I graduated here in 2013 with a degree in English, and I went straight to Hofstra. Can everyone hear me? Oh, okay. I went straight to Hofstra University, where I got an MFA in creative nonfiction, and now I work at the University of St. Joseph in residence life. I think that English is a very integral part of my day. In the way that I speak with students, in the way that I refrain situations and really transform it through some of the things that I've learned about creative nonfiction, the sense of self, and a lot of that kind of stuff. I think that within my degree, I have a lot of flexibility in the way I look at it and the way I perceive taking my degree into my professional experience. And so because of that, I think that I've really been able to make a successful transition into the professional world, even though I'm not in an English field with what I'm doing. I really use a lot of the things that I've learned every day, and I can go into that a little more later.
Hi, everybody. I'm Reese D'Angelo. I currently work as an academic advisor at Goodwin College in East Hartford. When I first started, I wanted to be an English teacher, and I did everything except student teach when I realized it wasn't for me. So I used my experiences working at the Student Center here and being involved on campus, and I got my master's in counseling and student development in higher education. So working with you all. And that is what I do now. Combined with my counseling skills, I use my English skills and the communication skills that are associated with that every day in my job. I work with a lot of first-generation college students, and it's really important to be able to present information in a way that they understand, having not had a lot of experience with college, but also in a way that's accessible to them. And I think my education here definitely helps me do that.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Turquoise McBride. I graduated from Eastern in 2009, and I graduated from Southern Connecticut State University in 2011 with a master's degree in English and a concentration in African American literature. I am currently working at the Department of Social Services in the Long-Term Services and Support Unit. I use English every day in my job. It's very important for me to be able to communicate effectively, and the skills that being an English major really helped me with that on a day-to-day basis, whether it's written communication or just talking face-to-face. So that's how I use English in my world.
Hi, my name is Ashley Cuss. I graduated in 2013, and I went on to get my master's at Quinnipiac University. I graduated last December, and I worked at WFSB for a year as an associate producer, and now I work at the Record Journal for the Berlin Citizen, their weekly paper, as a reporter. I use my English skills every day because I write a lot of stories. I do like 5 to 6 stories a week, and the faster you get them done, the better, so they can get online and in print. So I don't need a lot of editing on my part, which is good for my editor. Grammatical errors and stuff are very rare. So English has helped me a lot in that way.
Thank you for introducing yourself. So the first question we have is for all four of you. So since all four of you majored in English and you all ended up in different fields, would you say that majoring in English is versatile? And would you recommend the major for someone who's undecided?
I definitely am very happy that I went with the English degree, even though that's not my end game. Maybe someday I'll be teaching, maybe someday I'll be taking English in a very direct manner in my professional career, but right now, working in higher education, I think that a lot of what we heard from the panelists about, oral communication, written communication being very essential. I think that that's something that I take into consideration every day, but I also think that the major is what you make of it. it's the classes that you take and the extracurricular activities that you have within the degree that shape the experience that you have. Not only are we writing papers and studying lit through the courses that we're taking and things like that, but you're really crafting your future through the degree that you choose. So if you're going in undecided and you choose to go with an English degree, what that really does for you is that says that you're well-versed, that says that you're willing to take a lot of things into consideration, analyze it, mold it, whether that's, you know, in the lit courses or in the creative courses, and really having a deeper understanding of it. And I think a lot of that goes towards problem solving, goes towards conflict management. It goes towards a lot of the things that you're going to experience in any profession that you have. It's just how you look at the degree that you have and how you look at the experience, which makes it important in the way that you transition into your professional career.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Of course, I recommend English. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. You know, I also minored in history, and something that I liked pairing those two together, English and history, is that they gave me the skills to be able to make connections between phenomena and circumstances in the world that other people might not be able to connect to each other. And there's a lot going on in the world right now. There always is, but especially right now, and I as I become more politically aware and involved, the skills I got as an English major combined with my history minor and working in higher education really give me the tools to think critically about my environment and about legislation that's come up for higher education in particular. And a lot of people don't necessarily make those connections between an English major and being politically aware or, seeing history repeat itself. And so that's something that's definitely helped me personally learn about myself and how I feel about what's happening in the world, but also professionally. So of course I recommend it.
Yes, I also would definitely recommend it. I think the common misconception of, I think the common misconception of being an English major is that it's a major that kind of places you in a box, but I found it to be very limitless. You're going to use writing in almost every field that you go into. So I definitely would encourage someone who is still undecided to choose English as a major, but I would also encourage you to be proactive and purposeful in choosing what your passion is and deciding what you're going to do and be very intentional about that. So that's what I would say to that question.
Yeah, I agree with most of with all the panelists. I would definitely recommend English, mainly because reading so many books a week and doing so many papers, it gets you quick on your feet. And with me, with journalism, I have to read so many press releases, pick out details from that. I have to read, countless emails, and they're so long sometimes because people will give me story ideas, and they'll have like their whole, countless paragraphs of story ideas and details about the story. So fast reading skills and quick writing, writing analytical essays, research skills are super important in my field in journalism. Getting the facts right, really important. So I think, out of English, reading, writing, research, it all kind of goes together into my fields really well. And as I said, editing is really important to not take a lot of time on it. I really don't have to spend a lot of time on editing my work, and it's easier for my editor too. So English is it's a really versatile degree.
All right, thank you thank each of you for the responses. The next question is for all four of you again, and it is: when you were younger and people asked what you were going to do with your BA in English, how did you respond?
I think it depends on when you ask me. When I was younger, there's so many different ways that I took it. When I first went into Eastern, I had every intention of being a secondary English teacher. That was the path. I had very strong teachers in middle school and high school that really propelled me to think that that was something that I could do. And I got scared out of that really quickly. I was very intimidated by the perfection that I thought a teacher needed to have. And standing in front of a group of people every day and needing to be on was something that I wasn't prepared to do. So initially, what made me change to focus just on English was that's what I thought I could handle. And then as my semesters went on in my time at Eastern, I started to realize that a lot of the skills that I was getting in my English classes and a lot of the things I really liked about it was how I was interpreting it and spinning it to be what I wanted. So I chose the BA in English to be something that, you know, I can transform it and I can go and be an English teacher. I can go and work in higher ed. Maybe I'll be an editor. I think at one point I thought I could handle nursing, but that's clearly not the case. But the skills that I was getting with the degree that I chose, I always saw it as something that was versatile, and I always saw it as something that no matter what I do after this, since I had no idea what that would be, I knew that this was going to be a good foundation for me to learn and grow moving forward.
Yeah, so no one actually ever asked me, what are you going to do with that BA in English? Thankfully, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe some people should have questioned my goals a little bit just in general, but it worked out for me. So I was never really faced with having to answer this question before I was ready to. And if you are pursuing a degree in English right now and you still don't know the answer to that question, that's okay. Because for me, I'm 5 years out, 4 years out, and I'm still figuring it out. I love what I do as an academic advisor, but is it something that I would have said in college that I want to do using my English degree? No. Do I use it every single day? Of course. So, keep that in mind. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. We were just talking about this before the panel started. Also, I'll say getting my degree here at Eastern in particular, an English degree at Eastern, really prepared me for probably just about anything I wanted to do, because this is a liberal arts education, as I'm sure you've heard a million times. But the liberal arts aspect of this education is what's most valuable to me, because I wasn't just an English major studying lit or, literacy in a vacuum. It was associated with a number of different types of classes and experiences that I also had here that Eastern values. And at least in my experience, outside of Eastern, those well-rounded experiences are also valued. So although I was never asked the question, and I don't know how I would have answered at the time, that's how I answer it now.
When people ask me what I wanted to do, I always said that I wanted to teach. My grandmother was a teacher, so it always kind of inspired me a little bit. And then I tried teaching. I taught as a substitute teacher and for an after-school program, and I found that that wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't where my passion lied. So I, like Reese, I'm still figuring things out. But I also encourage you to just remain open to your journey and remain open to, while you're studying, to the different things that you may, the different opportunities that you may come across, because you never know, where your life is going to lead you. So that's what I would encourage for you guys.
Okay. I'm a little unique. In second grade, I told my mom I wanted to be a writer, an author and illustrator to be exact. And I wrote my own little chapter books. I wrote short stories. So coming into Easter, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a writer, which is very impractical to be an author and be a best-selling author, which is what I wanted to be. And I learned that I really loved journalism. I loved telling people stories, which is an amazing thing to do, and people get to read it, and I wanted my own byline. So I guess when people asked me what I was going to do with BA in English, I just said be a writer, because I wasn't really sure if I was going to go down that path yet. And as I got into junior year, I decided master's in journalism is what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn as much as possible about the field that I wanted to go into. So it's probably really weird from the start, telling everyone I want to be a writer in second grade, but I kind of just stuck with it. I never changed my mind. There's so many courses here, and I was like, oh, maybe I want to do this. And I took a few art courses. I took public relations courses, communications. I have a minor in communications. So no matter what I wanted to do, I wanted to write. So that's what I told people.
Thank you guys. I have a question for Reese. What makes you so interested in your work with first-generation college students?
So glad you asked. I have prepared for this question. Okay, so does anyone here, you can raise your hand and it's okay. Does anyone here not know what a first-generation college student is? Because I didn't. All right. I guess I was unique in that. But when I was in college, I didn't know that I was a first-generation college student. I was first in my family to graduate with a college degree, and there's a lot of varying definitions of that, but I considered myself first-gen. Went and in my master's program in higher education is when I finally learned that I belonged in this this type of student, that I was this type of student. So in my role now, I work with first-generation college students a lot. And because I think I found out so late that I was a first-gen student, and all my experiences, in a lot of ways, I felt alone in college because no one had done it before me and was willing to share those roles and those experiences. So when I got into my master's program, I wanted to dive into that further, not only to provide others with a sense of how to understand these students. I developed a student development theory for this, but also I kind of learned about myself too at the same time. So it works out because now I deal with first-gen students every single day, helping them with academic advising at Goodwin. And I don't think I would have been able to work with them as successfully had I not had my own experiences as well in that, and studied it, of course, in grad school. I think I answered your question. I don't know.
Have you encountered any struggles working with first generation students that may not realize their potential for success?
Yeah, all the time. So in my role, students come to me after they've taken a placement exam. Some of you probably took it for math or English coming into Eastern as well your first year if you started here. I then review those scores with the students, and every student gets a chance to take the exam a second time if they don't like the way that they've performed. They feel like they could do better. Most of the time, students say, no thanks, I'm good, and they want to take whatever, maybe foundational class that they place into. Well, I really encourage them to always take the exam again. And I think part of the reason that they say no is because they don't believe that they can do better than they did the first time. And I can't tell you how many times that a student's score has jumped, 30 points. And all it is that they have more confidence taking it the second time. So a common struggle that I notice, at least with first-gen students at Goodwin specifically, but across the board, is that you haven't heard a lot that you can do X, Y, and Z. You haven't heard that you can do better. And so I hope to be that type of person for them and tell them that they can achieve greater and they don't have to settle for anything.
Thank you. This question is for Ashley. Many English majors consider going into journalism but are unsure of whether journalism's for them. Do you believe the campus or your involvement with the Campus Lantern while you were here helped you after your college career ended? And if so, how?
Yeah, definitely. Spring of my freshman year, I joined the Campus Lantern. I started as a staff writer. I think the next semester I was ad manager, which is a paying position. Then I was news editor, and then by my senior year, I was editor-in-chief. And all that experience gave me a huge portfolio of stories. I wrote everything from news, opinion, arts and entertainment, even a sports story. And not very good at those. But I had this huge portfolio, and I put it online. And because I didn't have a communications degree, I was actually the only one in my master's program that did not have a communications degree. I would have had a harder time without the Campus Lantern to get in, just because I didn't have that portfolio of all these stories that I had done and all this experience. Basically, trial and error, trying to write a story, trying to get people to talk to you. And a lot of times journalism people don't want to talk to you, which is very common, and people are rude to you. And so learning that from, my classmates that I would interview, professors, administration, I kind of had a upper hand in someone who maybe didn't have that portfolio, which I needed to get into grad school. So I really believe that the Campus Lantern helped me tremendously into getting to grad school, getting into journalism, because my field is very much about experience, not the degree. So I think it helped a lot.
Thank you. This one is for Megan, and we talked about it briefly at dinner, but what about your experiences here at Eastern influenced your decision to pursue an MFA?
So when I came into the English degree at Eastern, I knew that creative writing was more of my interest than English literature. I struggle with lit. I still struggle with lit, and I recognize that in myself as a student. So I tried to gear most of my classes towards writing and creating and things that I could have a little bit more control over in the way that I was getting my education. And I remember looking at the minor in creative writing and looking through the list, and one of the requirements would have been creative nonfiction, and I had no idea what it was, but I figured it satisfies a requirement, it propels me forward, let me just take the course, and I fell in love with it. I realized that a lot of the creative writing I had been doing in fiction and poetry was really closer to the genre of nonfiction than I would have known before, and that gave me a lot of insight that, I can write about my own life without having to fictionalize this, and I can write about things that seem so extraordinary without making it fake and with owning it as real. And so in taking that class with Dr. DeRosa, I really, I grabbed onto it. I started studying it on my own. I started working with Dr. DeRosa in teaching assistantship, and that's what got me to think of an MFA. It wasn't something that I had ever anticipated coming in, that I would get a master's degree, let alone a master's degree in English. In fact, I remember writing an essay in one of my intro to the English major courses saying, if I ever got an English degree in my master's program, this is what it might be. And I had no sense of confidence in that until I got to the MFA program at Hofstra, and wouldn't take it back for anything.
So bouncing off of that, how rigorous was the process of getting it, and do you have any advice for English majors that are interested in pursuing creative writing as a career?
Sure. I will speak to Hofstra's experience in terms of the MFA. While I have some insight in other degree programs, I think each graduate program is always going to be unique in their expectations and the level of work that you have to do. Like I was explaining earlier, I really take my degree programs and make them my own. I really try to find something that fits my needs. So I knew that I wasn't going to be very strong in lit classes, and for my master's program, I really wanted to be confident in what I was taking. So I looked for a degree program that really focused on the creative aspects of things, had a foundation in literature, and had a foundation in that, but really allowed the writer to explore their writing aspects. So the literature classes that I took at Hofstra were based on looking at English literature from the perspective of a writer and really making that something that was fully in my interest. I would also say that I know I'm not a test taker, so I looked for a school that I didn't have to take GREs. When I was in the search, I had almost all of the credentials for Columbia except for the GRE. So looking at that, I wouldn't have changed it, but it's something that I always put into perspective when I talk to students. If you're willing to take that extra step and take the GRE, it really opens your door to other schools that you are able to go into. But having that realistic conversation with yourself, is this something that I want to do? Is this something I'm willing to do in order to go to a different school? When I got to the master's program, and even after I walked across the stage with my degree, I really do struggle to call myself a writer, because in the degree, in the field of nonfiction, it's really hard to get to be considered credible as a young writer. because often you're criticized in the field of nonfiction that you haven't lived enough to really be able to write about your life. You haven't experienced enough to look at it from a critical lens. A lot of authors, when you listen to author talks about a nonfiction genre, they say, well, I needed to wait 25 years. I don't have 25 years to wait for a story right now, and I want to write it right now. So I think in terms of that genre for me, it does take a toll on my confidence in the writing that I do, but I haven't let that stop me from writing. I haven't ventured into publishing yet, but I'm working on building my collection so that when I'm ready and when I do have that confidence, I can come out strong. And I think going into a field of creative writing, you have to find that confidence. You have to be willing to trust yourself as a writer. When you put that pen to the page or when you put your fingers to the keys, you are a writer. And it's just a matter of finding your audience and being willing to start over, being willing to scrap what you had and start new, and reworking your stuff until you get it to a place where you're okay with it today, knowing that next week you're going to look at it and you're going to want to start all over again. It's a never-ending process in the creative world, so don't be afraid of that.
Thank you. This next question is for Turquoise. Why did you choose to go into your professional field despite studying African American Lit as a graduate student?
One of the things that I had to learn was that my degree wasn't going to define me or the path that I took. I studied English and I studied African American literature simply because I had a love for both. And what I do love to do is I love to connect with people and I love to be a resource for people. And studying African American literature and studying English and all of the layers that studying English comes with has only added to my experiences to make them more fuller than I would have expected them to be in the first place. So.
To go off of that, what influenced you to become as active in your community as you currently are?
Just, growing up, I had a hearing impairment, and so just from when I was a child, I've always had people in my corner pouring into me and making sure that, they were a good support system for me. And when I came to Eastern, I just had a great support system. So I wanted to be able to give that back to somebody who also needs a support system. I realized just in reflecting that the great need for someone to just be in your corner and letting you know that, just like Reese was talking about with the first generational college student, just letting them know that, I'm here for you, I'm here to support you, you can have better. And so that's why I have gained a passion for giving back to my community.
Thank you. This one is for Ashley. Could you talk about your influences in getting a master's in journalism and your experience at WFSB?
Sure. So I really love school. I love going to class. I love learning. So I wanted to continue my education and learn as much as I could about journalism. And the great thing about the master's program at Quinnipiac is it's really like a training ground for journalism. It's not so much, here's an assignment, do and I'll grade it. It's more like, here's an assignment, I'll grade it to see if you can make it out in the real world of journalism. So it was, I really wanted to learn, as I said, as much as I could about journalism as I can, because it's a very extremely competitive field. And through Quinnipiac, which I highly recommend for journalism, it does have great reviews. It's one of the top journalism schools in the country. My advisor was great, and he led me to the internship at Channel 3, and that was a great experience, and through that I got my job. And my internship was kind of like a 9-to-5 kind of deal, 3 days a week. It was for credit, and I did get paid, so they can only give you a certain amount of hours. So I kind of went into the job thinking it'd be sort of the same. It wasn't. I worked 2 a.m. to 9 a.m. I worked every holiday. I worked through every snowstorm we had last year as an associate producer, and I learned that's where you have to start off. Nobody starts off as a reporter, and if you do, you end up in like Iowa. It's true. So there's how it works. There's 200 markets, and actually Hartford County is one of the top 50. So if you land in Hartford as a reporter, you're doing pretty well. So not very common if you just get your graduate degree. So I stayed there for a year, did the 2 a.m. 9 a.m. shift, worked the holidays. I wrote scripts, which was really great because the anchor is actually reading your words, which is pretty cool. But the thing that kind of bothered me is no one at home knew that was my work. I didn't get my byline. And it was kind of like they're reading on screen for 20 seconds. The anchors have 20 seconds to read each story, sometimes more if you're lucky. So it was like a story in such a small little snapshot. And I really wanted to be more detailed. I'm a very detailed writer. So I'd always have my stuff cut down a little bit because I wrote too much. And then I did the teleprompter, which is you sit there for 3 hours and you turn the screen so the anchors can read it. That's where you have to start off. And it was a great experience. I don't regret it. It was amazing. But you never get used to 2 a.m. to 9 a.m. They'll tell you that. You never get used to it. The anchors don't get used to it. The reporters don't get used to it. And these people have been there for, 10 plus years. So, it was a great experience, but going into it, if you want to get into journalism, that's kind of where you're going to start, is an AP. And if you're lucky, you get to be a producer. But again, it's the same hours. They put all the younger people at the very early hours, and 9 to 5 is like seniority. So, and there really is no 9 to 5 in journalism. But it was a great experience. I got to meet a lot of great people and really great networking, as I'm sure we'll talk about after. And I met all the people you see on Channel 3, which is pretty cool. And, it's kind of like meeting local celebrities and getting to see what they do. And just very behind-the-scenes look at how TV works. And it was really interesting. Can't learn that in a classroom. So.
Do you have any advice for those aspiring to pursue a career in journalism?
Yeah. As I said, I feel like on TV, journalism looks really, really fun, and it is. But as I said, you don't just be a reporter. You don't just become an anchor. In fact, you can't even apply to be an anchor. You have to. There's very rare instances where you can apply to be an anchor. If you want to be a TV anchor, you have to be a reporter first, and they kind of have to ask you to be an anchor, and that's when you kind of you're like a substitute anchor. So I would say kind of have that in mind. You really have to go through the grueling hours to get to where you want to be. But I do know a lot of people in my field who, in my grad program, who went on to be reporters, but they're not in Connecticut. they're in Iowa. Quite literally, one of them is in Iowa. I don't know where the others are. But, you're not going to end up in New York. You're not going to end up in Boston right away. It takes a lot of work. And if you do, you're in the right place at the right time. So it's an interesting field because there's a lot of luck in it. If you are in the right place at the right time, if you do have the connections, it's really all about networking to find someone who can kind of mentor you, because there's just so much you can learn in a classroom. So with my grad degree, I learned the training, but it was up to me to get the job. But Quinnipiac is very well known for getting you a job after graduation, and my advisor is very well known in the journalism world. He worked at Time Magazine, which is really cool, I think. So, if you pick a good journalism school, they can help you, but it's kind of up to you. So I think you have to have that in mind. And lots of note-taking. Take tons and tons of notes. People talk really fast. Yeah.
Thank you. And on the topic of networking, it's become, this question is for all four of you. On the topic of networking, it's become such a crucial skill to know how to network. Could each of you provide any specific advice concerning networking?
A lot of the networking that I had to do throughout grad school came from experiences like going to the National American Writers Writing Programs Conference, going to talks in New York City where you're with writers and producers, writers and publishers and editors. And so a lot of that came from, you have a little bit of face-to-face time, but it's that follow-up, whether it's through social media, through, sending an email, getting a business card, those kinds of things. Often it's coming from a few seconds of interaction that you have with somebody, but it's that follow-up that you get. I know a lot of the connections and the conversations that I have with writers across the country is obviously through social media, because I'm not seeing them on a regular basis, but I do a lot through Twitter, actually, seeing the books that they have, seeing the things that they have out there, and that's something that's been successful for me.
Yeah, I use Twitter a lot as well for networking, but in terms of those real connections, those in-person experiences, what means the most to me when networking is authenticity. And I can't tell you how many times that someone has come up to me after, a conference presentation, and they're very nice in the things that they say, but they want something from me because they just saw me present. And that's fine. And if it works out and I'm able to give it, great. However, what means the most is an authentic connection, just for the sake of having that connection. So my advice to you would be to develop relationships with people before you need something, because then when you do need something, you can draw upon that relationship. Also, a piece of practical advice from going to conferences and workshops: when you do get a business card, and you should always get a business card when possible, take a second away from that person to write down on the back of that business card how you met them and one key fact or interesting thing that you talked about with them. That way, when you follow up or when they contact you and you pull out the business card, you can remind yourself of how you know that person. It's really embarrassing if you don't remember them or don't know anything about what you talked about. And if you don't remember on the within the same vein as authenticity, just own up to it. Just say, I am so sorry. I got so many business cards that day, and I'm trying to remember. Will you remind me how I know you? And that's more valuable than anything else. And in that humility, I think people are very receptive to it.
I would definitely encourage students to definitely take full advantage of your college experience. Join a club. Try to get on an e-board. Become a part of an e-board. I would also advise you to take on an internship or volunteer. You never know, who you'll meet, what kind of relationships you'll build, and you'll never know what you'll learn about yourself through stepping out of your comfort zone. So I would definitely encourage students, as far as networking goes, to just step out. You pay a lot of money to go to school here, and some of that money goes to putting on programs like this. So, take full advantage of it. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think social media is a really big part of networking. LinkedIn has helped me a lot. That's a really good networking. It's also good to find a job. But I actually got some networking here. Working on the Campus Lantern as editor-in-chief, I booked a guest speaker from the Current. And our advisor on the Campus Lantern had known him, so we had him come in and he spoke. And I kind of talked to him after, and I was just really inspired by his work. So I emailed him later, he gave us his business cards. I emailed him later and I asked if he had any advice, that kind of thing. And he kind of mentioned an internship. I didn't get the Current internship because I didn't have enough experience. So, but it was a really good opportunity to see where I can get connections from. And actually, how I got my Channel 3 connection was Jill Konopka came here to do a story, and I kind of reached out to her. I shadowed her through my grad program. I did a story on her, and I kind of shadowed her, saw what she did, took a tour of the studio. As you said, kind of got to know the person before asking for something from them. It took me a year later when I got that internship, and I actually contacted her again to see if she could recommend me. Because internships at Channel 3 or any of the big stations here, you do need a recommendation, and it's really great to get one from the inside. That's very helpful, and because they only have 5 spots available. So that's really important. And kind of emailing the person directly, when you're applying for jobs, instead of just applying for the job, the way I got the Record Journal is I emailed the editor directly. So, where it says the contact information when you're applying for a job, if you email them directly, it's a lot more personal and it kind of shows you really want it. But my job is all about networking. I talk to people every day, and sometimes they'll be like, oh, did you hear about this? And it'll be off the record kind of stuff. And they'll, tell me about something, and I'll be like, oh, I'll keep you in the back of my head for another story that I need. And that's networking too. So, networking helps me network because you're always reaching out to people for stories, and if you want to do a follow-up or go back to them later, you have to remember who they are, what they said before, where they're located, just simple things like that. So, but LinkedIn I find is the best way to communicate with people.
Thank you. This one is for Megan. How do you use your degree now as a residence coordinator?
I talked a little bit in my introduction that I think that I use it every day. As a residence coordinator, here they're called hall directors. I work with a very specific population of residents. I work at an all-women's undergraduate institution where we have less than 1,000 people. So I have to be very specific in the way that I talk to them and the things that I can give them guidance on. Unfortunately, a huge part of my job is conduct meetings. And I think that that's one area that I use a lot of my theory that I studied in my MFA program. I mentioned that I'm a nonfiction. I have my degree in nonfiction. And I think a lot of what I've studied in terms of how to write my characters, how to assess my own life, and how to invert my perspective has been very helpful in talking to students about looking at their own life, looking at their own actions, and taking an introverted perspective of what's going on. So one of the biggest things that I'm a proponent of is sense of self. And when you're writing a piece that's written in first person, we often think to, this person is this. And it really takes a lot to look back and say, well, no, this narrator is this character is this, and really separating that sense of self. So when I'm sitting with a student in a conduct hearing, you are not the action that you took. You are the person that's sitting in front of me right now who's looking back at the action that you took, and really taking that perspective on things. And I challenge my students to do the same thing with everything that they do in their life. So, if it's a conflict that they have in their personal life, if it's an opportunity or an experience that they have, really trying to separate those individual experiences and those individual interactions so that they can have a better understanding of that. And I think that that's something that I really pride myself in my nonfiction writing. And I think it's also kind of taken a spin in my day-to-day life when I look at that perspective and I look at that separation of self.
Thank you. For Turquoise, how has your degree in English helped you while working for the Department of Social Services?
Well, definitely, I also talked about this a little bit in my introduction. I work for the Long-Term Services and Support Unit, so I'm working with elderly and mentally disabled. So for me, it's just very important that how I'm communicating with you, you're understanding everything that I'm communicating with you, whether it's written communication or verbally. And so it just helps me, having an English major helps me pay attention to detail. It helps me make sure that I'm being clear in what I'm saying and that I'm being just very direct and being very, just being very direct and being very aware of how I am getting across to my audience and the people that I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So that's how that helps.
All right, thank you. And now we're going to open it up to the audience if they have any questions. And you can, yep.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Do you think that, I'm an English and education major, but I'm not sure that that's what I want to do. Do you think that being an English major, it's necessary to pair it with something else? Like you said, you're English and history. Do you think that it's, necessary to have, or communications, to have something else with it? Or can I just go off with English?
You mentioned history. I'll just start because that's in reference to my minor. Do I think you have to have that? No. Does it enrich my experience and my education as an English major? Yes. But I absolutely think that you can go out into the world as an English major without a specific minor or concentration and still find success. Megan alluded to this earlier, but it's all a matter of what you do with it. For me, with education, I loved those experiences, and I'm glad I paired English with education at first because I learned that that's not what I wanted to do. And my minor in history was purely accidental. I had taken an extra history class by accident, and after that class, I realized I was only 1 or 2 away from a minor, so I just fulfilled it. So it completely happened by accident, and I'm glad it did, but I personally would not say that you absolutely have to have something along with it.
All of my educational experience is in English. I have an English bachelor's in English and MFA in English. And I do often look at it critically in terms of where I am. I have every intention of staying in higher education for a while, whether that's sticking with the student activities and student affairs side of things, or I jump to academics is a debate that I have in my head every day. But in terms of where I am now and where I look to be within the next 5 to 10 years, I only have English on paper. But the graduate assistantship that I took when I was going through my grad program, my experiences as a club officer, I was president of RDT for 2 years. I worked in the RHA in the buildings that I was in. I was an RA in the time that I was here at Eastern. All of those extracurricular activities have filled that void in my resume. And particularly with my graduate assistantship and the job that I have now, I was less qualified than some of the other candidates in terms of what I said on paper. But in terms of the experiences and how I was able to mold it to what I wanted to do, I was the one that they ultimately decided on. I remember people looking at me when I got the assistantship and they said, "You're not in higher ed. How are you getting this experience and getting this opportunity?" And I was able to reference what I had done in undergrad and what I intended to do, even though I chose to get the degree in education, in English, as opposed to go with higher education. I was able to mold my extracurricular experiences in a way that it still got me to where I want to be.
And key English major attribute is that you're able to explain it and make people understand and believe what you have to say.
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about experience. You could have any degree, but if you don't have the experience to back it up, you're not going to get a job because, the degree just goes so far. So I don't think you need to pair it with anything. I think experience is more an internship in something maybe in communications, even if you don't have that minor. Like you said, I got my minor by accident. I took these electives and I was just like 2 or 3 away, so I decided to take more communications courses. But I think experience is just really key. It's not just the degree, but the degree helps with the writing aspects. I'm definitely a stronger writer than someone who has that communications degree and doesn't have the English degree in my field. So I think it's actually pretty great to have an English degree and be in a field that's not teaching, because you kind of have an upper hand on everyone else because your writing is so strong, your reading's so strong. So.
Yes?
Is this for all of you guys? Do you think that you found your happiness and or success within your English degree?
Definitely.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you say what was that you said?
Like your happiness or success. Like, I don't know if some people like to put those two together, some people don't. Like, do you think that you feel successful or happy with what you've chosen?
Yeah, I absolutely also feel happy with what I've chosen to do with my English degree. Like I said earlier, it's not the degree that defines you, it's the experiences that you have, like everyone else was saying, and you just make the most of your journey and what experiences you are given in life. And so through that, I definitely think that I have found happiness with with being an English major.
I was the type of student, and I still am the type of person where I want to learn about everything. And I constantly am reading, even if it's just a snippet of a news article. I just like to absorb all this information. And I think that curiosity helped me go a long way in terms of the English degree. But also the experiences that I got as an English major allowed me to explore lots of different fields, all within English. So in English, I see no limit to it. There's history, there's politics, there's even technology. One of my most favorite books from Dr. Faustino's class was Feed by M.T. Anderson. It's a young adult novel, and I find applications, and I actually wrote about it in my master's thesis in counseling because it meant that much to me. So I've definitely found my happiness in it. It has allowed me to be wide open in terms of what I learn about, and it didn't close me off to one specific study. You know what I mean? It's just, that's why I love it.
When I look back at my education as a whole, it's my English classes that I always draw to. And whether it's a story or an article that I read, or it's a conversation that sparked my interest, I ended up in creative writing, but there are aspects of rhetoric that I'd really love to explore. There's a lot of cross that I can see potential in. But I also think about the energy and the passion that I have when I come out of a writing workshop, or when I come out of, a conference or a new conversation with a writer that I haven't had before. And even if, work drains me, grad school's tough, it was those interactions and those encounters that I was able to refine that passion in English time and time again. It reinvents itself for me. So I really do think I find that happiness there.
Yeah, I really liked my English degree, my classes especially, like literature in England, not so much, but I liked Shakespeare, and I like, I got to take so many different variety of courses, and I'm a huge bookworm. I love reading. So that was a really great experience for me because I got to do what I wanted to do and also make a career out of it. And, I took creative writing, I took poetry, and what I do now is I have to analyze. Sometimes I have to analyze, statistics to put that into the story, pick things that make sense, and using quotes, pulling quotes out, putting them into context, making sure they're not out of context, 'cause that's really bad. So, there's just so much that I can pull from my English classes that make me really happy that I got an English degree, not a communications degree, to go into journalism. Like, yeah, I might have been a little bit more ahead than I was, but in other aspects I was more ahead than my classmates who didn't have the English degree. So, and I am really happy with what I'm doing now, very happy actually. I love being a reporter. It's an amazing experience. So, yeah.
All right, there's time for one final question.
Dun-dun-dun. It doesn't have to be about English. It can be about when you post-graduation.
Sorry, another question. Did you guys know each other before this panel?
Some of us.
Yes, Reese and I knew each other. We actually went to Ghana together in 2009 on a study abroad trip. So that's where we know each other from. And I just met these lovely ladies tonight.
Yeah, Megan was my dance troupe president, so we knew each other. Yeah.
And then I was president of Education Club when Megan was a sophomore. So it's a small world.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for coming out tonight, and
Thank you.
thank you.